Alright, this is Gary Downs, speech 3. Here's my first note card. And my second note card. Alright. See my 3 people? Wave, everybody. Alright, there's my 3 people. Alright. Hello, everyone. Latin American history is marred by harsh African slave trade, large slave plantations, and inhumane European, mostly Spanish, rule set forth from the original European conquests. Haiti is a unique case because it was originally Spanish but turned into a French territory that was ultimately overturned by slaves and became its own country. But it's different from other Latin American countries because it came from French rule as opposed to Spanish rule. But the slave labor in the area at the time was considered especially brutal when compared to other Latin American countries. But out of these conditions would rise a new nation formed by slaves that would defy many odds, but nonetheless struggle mightily in its establishment as a young nation. My name is Gary Downs Jr., and I study Latin American history at Columbia College. The purpose of this presentation is to inform you of the history, culture, and society of the Haitian people. All right. This is a map of Haiti. All right. This island right here was known as Hispaniola to the Spaniards back in the time of the conquest. Haiti was formed on the western portion of Hispaniola. On the eastern side is the Dominican Republic. Haiti's origins date back to the 17th century, and actually a little bit before. In this area of the Caribbean, the European countries that had colonies established here would hire privateers known as pirates to raid the other countries' trading channels, take their money, and send it back to whatever country hired them. So if they were French pirates, they would take down Spanish ships, take their money, keep some, and send the rest back to France. So the way that Haiti came about initially was those French pirates in this area decided to settle on the western side of Hispaniola, which was left abandoned by the Spaniards. They inhabited the eastern side of Hispaniola. So the French pirates settled there. They established settlements and called back to France to get some women to come over there and populate that side of the island. Spain, the city was called Saint Dominic, after Saint Dominic. And that colony would grow, or would become given to the French in the Rystwick Treaty of 1697. So once the French pirates settled on that side of the island, they, built up the land, and eventually the Spaniards gave it to them, so they wouldn't have to worry about it very much. In the next 100 years, that colony would grow, mostly due to slave labor and exports of coffee, sugar cane, indigo, cotton, and exotic spices. Tortuga was a main city in this area. It was a main trading port and well known amongst pirates at the time as well. The slave labor was especially harsh, according to David Gegas, author of the Haitian Revolutionary Studies. Much more harsh than any other slave communities, either north or south. Most of the harshest conditions were found in this area, which prompted the slave rebellion of 1791, which effectively ended French rule. It was a slave uprising that did that. Once they became a country on their own, they tried imitating French rule, but was unsuccessful. So they decided to do things a little bit different. Now, most of the slaves came to the Americas by the Columbian Exchange, the slave trade. That's how they got there originally. And then, like I said, all the pirates took over and started setting up establishments. And then now we're at the point where the slaves rebelled against the French forces and got their more or less independence. All right, so at this point, Haiti has just been born on the restlessness and fortitude of free and enslaved people of color, according to blackpast.org, and was the only successful slave rebellion in the Western Hemisphere, or anywhere really, to form a country. It was the only slave uprising that resulted in the forming of a country. All right, so this is how they originally got there. All right. Haitian origins, again, we went over this. The French pirates, the Treaty of Ryswick in 1697, Tortuga as a major city, the brutal slave labor, way worse than any slave labor found north or south of the region. The rebellion ends in 1971, and Haiti is born in 1804 as its own independent country. What happened after this was Haiti effectively split into two parts, the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. The rich held control of the government and the military, which effectively had control of the entire country over all the poor people. This was influenced heavily by U.S. policies. The U.S. at the time did not want to recognize Haiti as an official country. They were very anti-communism at the time. Latin America was largely socialist due to revolutions in Cuba and other countries. So America had a very anti-communism stance, which is why they presented so much resistance to Haiti back in the early 1900s. So much so that the U.S. actually occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934 under the guise of preventing communism and socialism from spreading, but actually they held economic interest in the country, and they actually enlisted the help of the Monroe Doctrine, which prevented European powers from meddling in Western Hemisphere policies and things. So they used that to occupy Haiti and really control them from a fiscal and political standpoint. They used a lot of puppet government officials to enact U.S. policy in this country. In the 1930s, Haiti as a population became pro-black. People known as mulattoes, which are a mixed breed between European and black folks, decided to turn from their whiteness to blackness and saying, instead of recognizing my heritage from Europe, I'm now black. And there was this pro-Afro, pro-black movement in the 1930s, which actually paved the way for political reform later on down the road, which I'll get to in a second. But in the 1930s, this pro-movement started, and it came to a point with the Duvalier family, who were dictators more or less from the 50s into the 80s, 57 to 86, I believe. All right. So after the U.S. occupied Haiti in 1934 and gave it back over to Haitian officials, they elected their first president, Stenio Vincent, which again was a puppeteer of the U.S. government. They put him in place so they could maintain control without actually having the Marines occupy the country. So the Duvalier family came by and actually presented some type of stability, although it wouldn't last. They were plagued by corruption. The father was Papa Doc Francois Duvalier, followed by his son Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier. Again, they were supported by the U.S. as a puppeteer official, but they were full of corruption. They embezzled funds from bailouts from other countries. The Tontons Macoutes, they were more or less a paramilitary element that went around and murdered people on behalf of the Duvalier family. They were pretty much the unofficial military of that family, and they, according to Bob Corvette of Webster University, they murdered up to 30,000 people. They used torture, they used murder, and they also used voodoo. One of the cases that I read about for voodoo was when Jean-Claude Duvalier left the country, he wanted to put a curse on whoever followed him, whoever succeeded him. So he got a voodoo doctor to sacrifice 2 male babies to curse the next person that came into office. It was not a good time for the Haitian people. All right, but after they got out of the Duvalier family with U.S. help, again, they started democratic elections, again, influenced by U.S. so that they wouldn't pick somebody that the U.S. didn't like. But nonetheless, they were semi-democratic. And they ended up picking their first president and had democratic elections ever since then. Today, Haiti is in need of help in almost every way. According to World Trade Press, they rank amongst the poorest in the world. And according to humansrightswatch.org, political instability prevents the government from addressing even the basic needs of people. Food, shelter, welfare, things like that. Health care, things like that. The prisons are overpopulated and many live in less than a 1 square yard of space. So a 3x3 box is essentially what these prisoners live in for 23 hours a day. Life got even worse after Hurricane Matthew in 2016, which ravaged the country and left a lot of poor people in even worse conditions, killed a lot of people also. Haitian society and culture has been strongly impacted by poverty and disaster in this regard and has permeated through society and culture in Haiti even today. As a testament of how poor this country is, 59% of the population lives on less than $2 US dollars a day. And that's according to humanrightswatch.org. All these other stats lend right to that same theme. 80% of the teachers have not received training in teaching. 90% of the primary schools are non-public and managed by communities or churches, meaning there's no consistency in education. The literacy rate is between 61 and 64% when compared to 92% for the rest of the Latin American area. Over 2/3 do not have formal jobs. They panhandle, they sell things on the street. They're called informal jobs. And 66% of the people that live in Haiti have these types of jobs, selling things on the street. Half the children don't attend school. There's no real grassroots way to build up this country because the corruption from previous politicians has eroded the foundation that you need to bring a country up. In this case, education, money, and welfare. Modern day Haiti is a lot different though. Well, not different in an economic sense, but a lot different in how people are. Modern day Haiti is rich in symbolic meaning. It has very strong ties to its origins of being the only country to establish itself through a slave uprising. They're very Afro-proud. The 2 main languages there are Creole and French. Creole was actually a mix of French and African American language that was brought over during the slave trade. It's not broken French. It has its own dialect, its own punctuation. It's a completely solitary language, all on its own. They're a huge soccer country. It's almost to the point of fanaticism and religion. They're a huge soccer country. And they're Catholic dominant at about 55%. The economic circumstances that help shape the culture there is prevalent through their everyday life. Christmas is celebrated, again getting back to that Catholic dominant part. Christmas is celebrated, but gift giving isn't really practiced because everyone is so poor. It's a really, really poor place. They still had that spirit of Christmas, just without the material gift giving. Cockfighting is also a popular sport, probably second only to soccer. This lends to the poverty-stricken nature of the country, that bets would be made, gambling would happen, and also it doesn't really cost a whole lot of money to have a chicken and fight it against another chicken. Voodoo and superstition are still substantial influences in Haiti. I mentioned the curse on the succession president of Jean-Claude Duvalier. Voodoo and superstition are still practiced in Haiti and still believed in Haiti for a small population. And I've referenced Hurricane Matthew back in 2016, and 175,000 people are still displaced 2 years later from that disaster. They don't have the means, they don't have the capital to really pull themselves up based on the history that I presented here. So So, in conclusion, Haiti is a nation with a strong national pride stemming from its origins in a slave uprising and the birth of a country. Citizens still identify with those origins even today. They're very proud of that fact. In fact, when they wrote the Constitution for Haiti, when they became a nation in 1804, one of the things that they put in there was white folks couldn't own land. They were very pro-Afro. They were like, this is our country, we're going to do it our way. And they wrote in their Constitution that white folks couldn't own land based on the treatment of their European slave traders, I guess was what we can call them. But despite that, they're still hardworking people. They're still very influential in teaching their children manners and respect. Again, they're very huge in soccer, very big in soccer. Despite the turn to education in the latter part of the last century, they are starting to make some efforts to come up out of the hole they're in with their literacy rates and their job markets and things. They still got a long way to go, but at least that cultivation and initiative toward education will at least start bringing some growth so that the country can branch out and come out of the poverty-stricken nature that it finds itself in. And hopefully with that new promise of young folks and education, the country can be restored not only from slave uprising to a nation, but slave uprising to a nation, to a successful nation. Thank you.